Okay, picture this. It's the moment none of us ever want to experience. The screech of tires, that horrible jolt of impact. You're in a car accident. And in that chaotic aftermath, seeing a tow truck pull up can feel like a huge relief. But as those flashing lights get closer, a whole new set of questions probably start racing through your mind.
Right, so in that incredibly stressful moment, what happens next? Who's actually in charge here? Is the price you're about to be quoted a fair one? Or is it just some number pulled out of thin air? Well, if you're in Melbourne, the answer is way more complex than you might think. And it's all part of a regulated system that we're going to break down for you right now.
So here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with what happens right after a crash. Then we'll look at who actually sets the prices. We're going to dive deep into the big debate between the towers and the insurers, see how Melbourne stacks up against other cities, and of course, get to the final verdict and what it all means for you.
First things first, it is absolutely crucial to understand that not all tows are created equal. And the type of tow you need, well, that changes the rules and the price dramatically.
See, on one hand, you've got accident towing. This is the serious stuff. Your car's been in a crash, it's not drivable. These tows have to be done by special accredited companies. You'll see they have tow number plates. And here's the key, in Melbourne, their prices are regulated. But on the other hand, you have trade towing. That's for a simple breakdown like a flat tire. Any tow truck can do that, and the prices are just based on whatever the market will bear. Understanding this difference is really the key to everything else we're going to talk about.
Okay, so since accident towing fees are regulated in Melbourne, who's the regulator? It's not the tow companies themselves, and it's not the insurance companies either. It's actually an independent body with a pretty formal process. Let me introduce you to the Essential Services Commission, or the ESC. Think of them as the independent referee. Their job, every 4 years, is to review all the accident towing fees. They dig into the data, they listen to everybody involved, and then they make a recommendation to the government on what a fair price should be. It's all about keeping the system safe and efficient. And they have a really clear 4-step playbook. First, they crunch the numbers, comparing Melbourne to other places. Second, they get feedback from all the key players, towing associations, insurance companies, you name it. Third, they wrap all that up into a big final report with their official recommendations. And then finally, that report lands on the desk of the Minister for Roads and Road Safety, who makes the final call.
All right, now this is where things start to get really interesting. Because when the commission asks for feedback, you basically have two heavyweights in the ring, the tow truck operators and the insurance giants. And you can probably guess, their ideas of a fair price are worlds apart.
So in one corner, you have the Victorian Automotive Chamber of Commerce, or VAC. They're speaking for the tow truck operators, and their argument is simple. The current fees are just too low. They say that with the costs of fuel, wages, and all their equipment going up, a lot of operators are struggling to even break even.
But in the other corner, you have the Insurance Council of Australia. Now, they're the ones who end up paying for a lot of these tows, and they have a completely different point of view. They think the current fees are, well, just right. And this disagreement is the central problem the ESC has to solve.
What's really fascinating here is that this whole debate boils down to two different philosophies. The VACC wants what's called a cost of service model. Basically, they're saying, let's calculate the real-world costs for an operator in Melbourne and set the price based on that. But the Commission prefers benchmarking. They say, let's compare Melbourne to other cities and to the competitive trade towing market to figure out what an efficient service should cost. They argue it's a better approach and, frankly, a lot easier than trying to verify every single expense for every operator.
So, to figure out who's right, the Commission had to play detective. They dove into the data, comparing Melbourne's towing fees to other major cities across Australia, and the results are actually pretty surprising.
When you look at the average fee for a standard tow, you can see Melbourne, at about $383, is kind of in the middle of the pack. It's a bit more than Queensland, but it's a whole lot cheaper than Sydney, Adelaide, and especially Perth.
And this chart really highlights the VAC's main point. They look at a city like Perth, where the average fee is nearly $560, and they say, see, Melbourne is way behind. But the Commission's report points out that it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. Perth's fees are higher for specific reasons, like higher wages because of competition from the mining industry out there. The Commission also dug into why a regulated accident tow costs more than a simple breakdown tow. And it turns out there are some really good reasons. Think about it. Accident towies have extra costs, like having to wait for police to clear the scene, cleaning up dangerous debris, and having to get there within 30 minutes, which means keeping trucks on standby. You just don't have those issues with a simple breakdown.
So, after weighing all the arguments, looking at all the data from both sides, the Essential Services Commission reached its final conclusions. So drum roll, please. What was the verdict?
And here it is, the #1 takeaway. The Commission recommended no change. Based on all the evidence, they decided that the current regulated fees for accident towing in Melbourne are appropriate. The only change they suggested is the normal annual adjustment for inflation, which already happens.
And that thinking pretty much applied across the board. The Commission also said no changes to storage fees, no change to the math they use to calculate productivity, and they decided that basic salvage services should not be price regulated right now. In a nutshell, they concluded the system is working the way it's supposed to.
But hold on, the VAC raised another really interesting, very modern point. What about electric vehicles? They argue that EVs are way more complex and riskier to tow, and there should be a separate, higher fee for them. It's a fair question, right?
The Commission definitely looked into it, but here's what the data showed them. Right now, EVs and hybrids make up only about 3% of all the cars on the road in Victoria. Just a tiny slice of the pie. So, because there are so few of them, the ESC decided it just wasn't necessary to create a whole new fee structure. At least, not yet. They did say it's something they'll need to look at again in the future.
So, after all of that bureaucracy and all that debate, what does this actually mean for you, the driver on the road? Honestly, the most important thing to come out of all this is knowing your rights, because in that stressful moment after a crash, knowledge is absolutely your best defense.
So listen up, because this is the important part. First, you have to be given and sign an authority to tow form before they even think about moving your car. Read it. Second, you get to choose where your car is towed. Don't let anyone pressure you. Third, the company has to give you different ways to pay: cash, credit, debit. Fourth, and this is a big one, the tow truck driver is not allowed to try and sell you on repair work at the scene. And finally, you have to be given an official leaflet that spells all of this out. If you don't get one, you need to ask for it.
So, this review shows that, for now, the system is seen as pretty stable. But it does leave us with a bigger question, doesn't it? As cars get more and more complex with things like EVs, and as the economy keeps changing, this debate over what a fair price really is, well, it's definitely not over. It just makes you wonder if it will ever be simple. And we'll find out again, because the next review is only a few years away.